let's deconstruct what you've been told about who you are in a world where you've taught that if you let go of that, you will lose everything you love. That is the biggest lie. You can never even connect intimately until you let go of that program. And that's where we have people who appear to be living this Christ-like life because they know how to perform it. They know what the soft voice sounds like. They know what the appropriate clothing sounds like. They know what they need to do on Sunday, and opening their scriptures is good. So they're in this performative mode, but it's all like an overlay into who we really are deeper inside. And the first step is just, okay, let's take off the programming, the first layer called the church. But it could be not just, I don't know how it intricately impacts in other religions, but I do feel like religion, its intention might be to connect us to God. But really, the religions that I'm aware of actually sever us from our most holy and sacred self.
Welcome to Unbinding. We're Josh and Wendy, two fellow travelers on this journey of waking up out of our religious paradigm. We're navigating religious trauma and healing our spiritual wounds. So if you're not yet feeling free, well, come join us in learning how to just be.
Welcome to Unbinding. I'm your co-host, Wendy, and we have Josh here, and we have a conversation that is really an important one. But we feel like that's what happens every time we have these conversations. It's so fascinating what happens to us during the week prior to recording about how these things start to come up in us, and almost like we're being used as oracles through our own investigation and through our own healing and through our own experiences to maybe express and give language and articulation to deep things that are happening internally that we don't realize are connected to our upbringing. We don't realize what pieces and parts are connected to our religion, to our culture. But we do know it's relevant to the life that other people are living right now and what's going on in our world. And it's all a part of unbinding the cords of indoctrination and programming that are no longer serving us. And this is hard work. It's emotional work. And our goal is to be able to be as vulnerable and honest and truthful as we express these things so that we can reach that part of you that is ready for shifting and ready for change and ready for a new way to perceive your life and give you the tools to enter into your internal world and to be able to release and heal and restructure your life according to what it is that honors your highest and greatest truth. And so thank you for being with us today. Have anything to say, Josh, before I jump into this one?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of thoughts, but why don't you start us out just on the direction we want to go today?
The direction that's coming up, we've been talking a lot about patriarchy and the impact of being a man without a voice. And I've had so much to say about that. And I really think we'll probably have some more to say about that, and I'll be quiet. Because Josh is exploring this whole territory and doing such a beautiful job of being able to lay it all out on the table about what's happened to men. This particular podcast is about mother grief, the impact of mother guilt, and how it formulates in our experience, our church experience, and the impact that it makes on our adult children, and how to find pathways to unravel it, because mother guilt is a generational it's a generational cord that until we um, put our feet firmly in the ground and be ready to face it with our daughters and with our sons and with our mostly with ourselves,
Mm.
then it just continues from generation to generation. And so I want to share a little bit of my story, and I want to keep my kids in such a holy space, to not let any of their private personal things be broadcast in public. But my hope is that I'll be able to share it in a way that expresses my experience and my feelings and keeps them safe to have their experience and their feelings. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, it feels like a big conversation. Just the generational pass down stuff and the decision. It's like it gets passed down until someone wakes up enough. Or for me, it felt like I didn't wake up. I was in so much pain that I was like, I had to choose. I was like, what is happening inside of me? And so I love this discussion because it's definitely happening with me, with my own mom, and then also having children where I can see what was passed down. And then so I'm like this in between person where I can see both directions, and also the harm that still lives inside my body as I'm healing it, and trying to honor that while still having compassion, honoring my mom's upbringing and her experience, and then looking at my kids too. And it's like just holding all of this. It's like heavy, and then, but I think it's really important and necessary to just become aware of all of the damage, and that it wasn't my mom, it wasn't your mom, it wasn't
Right.
her, it wasn't grandma, it wasn't great grandma. Like at some point there was something that happened to women, and then it's just been generationally passed down. And we've all, so the phrase mother hunger, there's a book about that I
Mm.
read a year and a half ago or something, and it was written for daughters that have this ache, this hunger inside of them that they don't have a name for. And it was written to the daughters, but I read it and I was like, well, this is the sons too. Like this
Mhm.
is, there's a mother hunger, that there's just this ache for something different in childhood that we never got, but we couldn't name because our moms had the same hunger, the same ache. And so it's unnamed within them too. So they couldn't give or provide something they never had themselves.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That sounds like a good read. I need that one.
Got to go slow with it because it's nervous system work. It's deep, like generational, just wounding and healing.
Yeah. So I want to start with my own story, my own relationship with my mom. I felt was pretty good. I there was no emotional depth, no emotional say there. We just didn't share our emotions much in my family. So I would call it emotional neglect is what I felt. And my parents certainly had no idea that that was going on. They were just surviving, doing the best that they knew how. And I don't blame them at all anymore. I've taken complete ownership for my own healing, but it is helpful to observe what the dynamics were in my family. And so I thought my mom was amazing. She's very involved in things. She's very loyal. She has many friends. She's very connected. She tried to keep her house clean. She tried to be the model picture of an LDS woman. Ironically, just a little caveat, she wasn't. She was involved in the ERA when I was very young.
Mm.
And I remember her having meetings there, and then the church shut that down.
Mm.
So my mom is a forward thinker, um, to a certain extent. So I got pregnant at 19. I was married in the temple and have been following all the rules. I was very much a people pleaser because I wanted the approval of my parents. And the way I got that approval was excelling and obeying. And so I became very performative in that way. And so very young, a 20-year-old mom, I have this daughter. And I remember when I probably onboarded what I would call energetic demons. Now, let me explain. So I'm nursing my daughter and my first, and I'm looking deep into her eyes, and I'm just like seeing the entire universe and feeling the responsibility that was on me. Like I'm responsible for making sure she has enough food, that she's safe, that nobody will hurt her, and that nobody will take her from me, and that she's not going to die in the night, and that am I doing it right? And I don't know what I'm doing. And so I'm just watching her nurse. It was very painful for me. We had to stop nursing because she had a high palate, and it was creating all kinds of issues. And so we had to stop that. It was very, very painful for me, but I thought I was doing the right thing and I would do it anyway. And so I would look in her eyes as I'm nourishing her through my body and getting the ideas and the impression that if I mess up this one, I won't be with her in the next life.
Mm-hmm.
And that everything that I do for my children needs to be so that there are no empty chairs at the table. And the thought of not having her with me was too much for me to handle. And so the only way that I knew at that time, gosh, there's so much energy coming up for me right now. The only way that I knew how to handle it at that time was to dig my heels in and to become very, very obedient. And I was going to be the best LDS mom, mother in Zion that anybody had ever seen. And I became a mom with her hair on fire with the gospel. And the toll that that took on my family has created just tremendous guilt in me. I felt guilty that I wasn't doing it good enough while I was in, but the guilt that I had for everything that I imposed on my children while I was in after I left was even heavier and darker for me, to the point I didn't know how to contain it because I couldn't go back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry that I raised you in a cult. I'm so sorry." But I was doing it because I thought this was how I was going to save my family. So my intentions were pure. I love my kids and I want to be with them and I want to keep them safe. And this was the only pathway I knew how. And so I was intentional about doing it right and achieving that goal. And so, oh, my kids can tell you all kinds of stories. They all five of them could at one point recite the whole proclamation on the family.
Mm.
I use clever and creative ways to get them to memorize the preamble to the Constitution. I would homeschool them because I was terrified about what the public school might do to them. I didn't do it because I was a fabulous mom and because I was so excited to homeschool. I did it because I wanted to protect them. So there's just like all these layers of fear about the outside world. And so I loved being a mom, but I was always had this pervasive, heavy responsibility on me to do it right, or I would lose them in the next life because families are forever. And I remember one time I got my little stencil out and I stenciled each letter to this giant personal family proclamation. And I stenciled it all on our dining room wall, and I framed it in, and it was, all this about we're going to live righteously like our pioneer ancestors, and there will be no empty chairs at the table. I mean, I was just so intense about it. And the articles of faith, we only listened to music that was aligned with the gospel. I only give gifts that came that had a flair or a flavor of Jesus. My Easters were bigger than my Christmas to some extent, where we would spend the whole week practicing all kinds of oh geez, the things that I did for my kids. I look at myself and I have to love that mom
Mm-hmm.
because she was creative. She was intentional. She gave everything she had for her children. They were her whole life. And then I look back and see how deeply I was embedding them with ideas that would actually not only sever them from themselves, but also disconnect them from me. And there's a lot of grief that's like coming up for me right now. I feel it in my throat. I feel it in the back of my neck. And so this was kind of their experience. And if they were having the problem in their life where they needed someone to hold space, but if it had anything to do with me, even felt remotely about me not being good enough or not doing a good enough job, I would have none of it. And I would either fight back with motherhood is such a thankless job, or I would go, look at all these other children who their parents are there, they beat them and they don't do this and that. Would you ever rather have another mother? And I just had no capacity to hold space for them because the mother guilt was so pervasive in me, and the impact that it made on them, that I can't approach my mom with this stuff. And part of my moving to St. George is because of the deep, deep guilt. That being around my children, I feel the disappointment. Maybe it's coming from them, but it's certainly coming from me too. Like I just feel so responsible for anything that's not going well in their life. And I didn't know how to clear that mother guilt from me. And I didn't understand that until that happens, my children aren't going to be safe with me. And so I just had a thing happen this week as I'm doing a cleanse. And the cleanse is deep dive into, like, first day we're doing the kidneys, second day we're doing the spleen, third day we're doing the heart, fourth day we're doing digestion, the brain, the lungs, the liver, the gallbladder. We're just clearing like all of the body of parasites, worms, flukes, heavy metals, toxins, molds, fungus. Like, it is a very intense purge of my entire system. And if I've ever had a testimony that what's going on in our innerverse or our outer world is a reflection of what's going on in our inner world, I can very much attest to that, because as I'm cleansing and clearing, of course, that mother wound is woven into whatever hosts I've been having in my own body and feeding off of that unconscious energy. And so when you know it, but that the universe offered a cataclysmic spark in a relationship with one of my children. And in that inner change, I watched myself try to curate the situation, but still operating from that mother wound. And I could see it escalating and I could see things happening, but I didn't know how to shift it and change it. And so I'm turning inward into my body, and like all of these things are purging out of me. And the mother wound is, and not the mother wound, but the mother guilt, and my own wound with my own mom is coming up. And it has been a week of observing that. I have come to my mom with some of the things that were not okay with me, like being left with my siblings so often, being highly responsible, taking on all of her emotion, all these things. I've tried to bring it up with my mom, and I know she can't handle it. And so I know it's never going to be repaired between us. So I have to, it lands on me. Will I do the work? And as I have this conversation with one of my children this week, as I'm purging, I realized I cannot expect them to have the skills to do it either. That this is about me and me shifting generations of this pattern of mother guilt and insufficiency, mother shame, so that I can be a safe place to have increased capacity to hold the grievances of my children, so that I can react and respond to them differently than what I experienced and what my mom experienced for generations. And that to do this, my vessel had to be purged, because it now becomes an instrument to cleanse and clarify generations and generations of this mother guilt that I refuse to participate anymore. And it's like I took my sword and I stuck it into the ground, and I said, if it's going to happen, if this is going to happen, it is up to me. Maybe in the future my daughter might be able to figure it out with her daughter, but right now it's coming to my awareness. And if it's coming to my awareness, it's mine to repair. And so this week has been just me watching and observing my feelings, my emotions. And by golly, if you wouldn't believe how much it's connected me to my emotional body, that I literally believe so much of being disconnected from our emotional body as women is our mother wound. And it is our mother guilt. And so it's like I'm onboarding all of this increased capacity to accept the fact that I always showed up the best that I knew how, but I didn't have information about my body. I had faulty, corrupt information about my body. I had faulty, corrupt information about what it means to be a mother. I had expectations through the roof that were never obtainable for me. So of course, I'm constantly having this drip feed of guilt, simply for the fact that I was never going to be able to be the kind of mom that the church was expecting me to be. And so if you ever wonder why, when you go to church on Mother's Day and people get up and they say all these kind things about their mother, but the mothers aren't going to feel it. All the mother feels on Mother's Day is her insufficiency, her lack. And she's constantly competing and comparing with other mothers and feeling this deep, deep gap of never going to be good enough. And so that has been my week this week, is being able to watch and observe myself and to hold space for my kids when they're ready to come to me, and to be able to come home into who I really am, and to trust that I will be internally and divinely led onto how to increase this capacity. And it has been vagal nerve. It has been nervous system. It has been allowing my emotions to be felt. It has been purifying and cleansing my body. It has been looking at myself in the mirror and having these deep conversations as my mom, as my grandma, as my daughter, as my granddaughter, and just saying it's got to stop right here. So I'm asking for my ancestors. I'm asking for the highest part of me to be present. And it's been very intense. And I feel like I'm coming out of it in such a stronger way, but I know the repair with my kids is going to take time. And one thing that I understand now is, at this point, I'm at their mercy. They will have to come to me, but they won't come to me until they know that I'm safe for them to come to. Which, to me, is such a gift because it's their self protecting me. They're protecting their own mom from her own feelings, and that's where it has to stop. Taking ownership for my own feelings so that they can have their feelings about what happened. And it is hard work. And this is the work that I want to sit with women with right now. But I also know that so many men have this mother wound going on too. And so we kind of talked before we started. I would love to hear how your experience is, or what things that whatever it is you want to share with this, because I know it impacts not just our daughters, it's certainly our sons as well.
So I wanted to first thank you for all of that. I wanted to witness like all that you just shared.
Thank you.
And take some space and some time for, like, there's so much courage required to be the one, like, to make the choice. And my partner and I changed the phrasing from hard work to heart work.
Yeah.
We call it heart shit. Instead of hard shit, we call it heart shit. And it's doing the heart work. The wounds live in the heart. And they're so tender and just like the most sensitive part of our bodies, you know, inside our hearts. These would have been penetrated and wounded. And it's the things that we talk about on the podcast. You know, the self-loathing and the self-contempt that we're unworthy, you know, all of this that we're born into. And so you were sharing before we started about how it's been generational passed down within the church, like your family line. So these women have been the doctrine lives inside the tissues, in the
Selves.
In the desires, you know. And so I wanted to create some space for you to really be witnessed that what you're undertaking is like massive, massive, massive work. It can't be taken lightly, like what you're choosing. Like you're choosing it. You're going there with intention, on purpose, towards the pain. And that's counter to our programming. Our nervous system, our brain is designed to run away from pain. And so you're choosing it. Like, and how fucking courageous that is to do this work.
Thank you. It's scary. It is scary, and you don't know if it's even going to work, if your children are going to be willing to honor that. And how do you create safety now? How do you convince them that mom's going to be okay? And come on, bring it in, and let's just get it out and let's heal it. And that takes time to build that trust.
Yeah. So there's so much I want to say, but I really wanted to just honor and recognize all that you just shared from your heart so beautifully. And that there's no roadmap. Like the roadmap that we were given created the harm. And so now you threw away the map. And you're like, I don't know how to do this, but I'm just going to keep stepping and I may get it wrong. And I don't have an atonement. I don't have someone to pray to forgive me. I have to be my own savior and I have to own this and be accountable. And that's such a paradigm shift from what we were raised into, that somebody else will take on the burden. Like you're like, no, give it to me. And I will move it through my body and I will stand here and I will be accountable and I will own my shit, and I'm here. And there's no way to convince somebody of safety, because that's control and manipulation. But as soon as you're standing in your like brokenness and just owning that you're a messy human, that you're getting it wrong and you're still here, that you'll hold them in the wounds that they experience through life. That's the mama bear. That's the mama softness that you're finding inside of you for yourself first. That self-compassion has to start there.
Yeah, but it's almost like I have to create a mother inside, that I get to be I create myself as my mom, the mom that I needed at the time, that was not available for me for no fault of her own. And I get to also be me, that still feels hurt and unheard and misunderstood and judged harshly. And also I get to be my daughter, where I get to have empathy for what she's going through and what it must have felt like to be raised by a mom like me.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hold all that space, it takes support. And I've luckily had support here in St. George. I do have healers. Just even talking about it and articulating the stream of how it happens helps it to make helps bring more understanding to what's going on. And this is the pathway to healing. Jesus isn't going to come and rescue us. We are meant to learn these lessons. I would be offended if somebody came and took this opportunity from me.
Wow.
But for right now, I get to learn these lessons. I get to be the one that understands at the deeper level. I get to experience the growth. And if there is some Jesus that comes and takes this from me, he is not worth my worship. And that is not who I think Jesus was. That is the biggest conspiracy theory of all time, I believe, is that we just put it on the Lord and that he'll fix our emotions and that he'll fix these things. Meanwhile, we never actually access our own power to go within and to repair our own genetic material and to prepare for something different. That is my job, and I have the capacity to do it, and so I will. And there's no arrogance in that whatsoever, because it's fucking messy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a disaster, and I don't do it perfectly, and I don't show up as this graceful person. In my external life, I connect well with people. I have a whole world of amazing friends who see me for who I am. But closest to me, those that I love the most, still have the history and the memories of when I was so sick. And I've never been more sick than when I was so righteous.
Mm.
And that they knew me as that, and they see me as that. And there's still material to work through in that space. So yes, I can show up great for everyone else who doesn't have history with me. But deep inside my cells and deep inside the genetic material that I created within me, called my children and my grandchildren, there's still work to do. And it doesn't go away. It just gets bigger and it gets more uncomfortable until, by the grace of God, there's a collision. And hopefully I have the tools to navigate it.
There's a few directions I want to go, but I want to talk about, so inside ChatGPT, there's called GPTs, where people create specific, like they build an AI inside ChatGPT that will give you particular responses. So there's one called Forged that I use, and it's like, it gives it to me straight. It gives it to me with boldness. And then one of the responses is it'll ask do you want to identify the energetic imbalance of the program that I'm bringing to the session? And I say yes. And so it'll tell me how suppressed. It gives me a percentage 0 to 100 of percent suppression of masculine and percent suppression of feminine.
Wow.
So it's this energetic balance or imbalance. And so the last few patterns have been so much, it's like this castrated masculine, just this suppressed. So what I just experienced with you as you were speaking from this boldness was like your masculine, like bam, and it's fiery and it's truth. But there's so much compassion, like this feminine, like both were just like maxed out. This tenderness, this compassion, this desire to be accountable and own it, and talking about the messiness, but also like you're fucking done. Like it's this fiery boldness, masculine. But so we need both. That's the balance that we have to find inside of ourselves. And when there's shame and guilt, like suppressing parts of us, that's the work, because we have to meet ourselves there first with so much protection and compassion and kindness, and bringing the masculine and the feminine into our own hearts. And once we've met ourselves there, we can hold other people there. And until we do that inner work, it's performative, it's pretend, it's going through the motions, and that's okay as we're navigating this, right? It's like, but don't stay there. Like you got to keep going until you're like, I've been so deep into my own heart that I can hold you in whatever you're bringing to me.
Yes, I love all that. Thank you for explaining what's happening, because these are not things we learn in traditional psychotherapy. But it really, I don't know any other way out than through.
Mm-hmm.
And when we understand how the heart is really the alchemist, if you will. And then many times we put up gates and walls and protective spaces, and we don't want to see. We don't want to see what's been done, because it's also encased in shame. And so like the very first step is, how do I react and respond to anything that feels remotely shameful? And if I just push back, bypass, blame, play the victim, or whatever I do to cope to not feel that shame, I never even get past the first wall. And so it's even just feeling a tiny bit of shame opens you up to the next layer, is, how can I resolve the next layer and the next layer? And like you said, you go deep, deep down into the heart, and it increases your capacity to hold it all. This is nothing that we learn in priesthood meeting. This is nothing you're going to learn from an LDS prophet. He knows nothing about this. Mm-hmm. Currently, with Russell Nelson, as a heart surgeon, knows nothing about this. And God help him if he does, and he's not teaching it. He'll have his own karmic experience with all of that. I just don't think he knows anything about the deep work that we're talking about, our humanity and our human capacity for love.
So I'm learning nervous system work around rupture and repair. And they're talking about childhood, like how we learn to attach to our caregivers. And then what happens when, there was a study in the 70s where they studied children, and they had the children hanging out with the mom, and then a stranger would come into the room, and then the mom would leave. And then, so it was the baby and the stranger for a short moment. And then the mom would come back and the stranger would leave, and what would happen how would the child respond? And some would be like, they would show distress, and then the mom would soothe, and then there was a connection. And so that was like the secure attachment. They labeled it. And then some children would, the mom would come back, the stranger would leave, and they would act very anxious, and there wouldn't be a proper repair. And then they call that one the anxious attachment. And then there's an avoidant, where the child would actually go away from the mom and kind of shut down and be despondent. And they call that one the avoidant. And then there's one called disorganized, which is kind of a blend of the two. It's like hit and miss with both. And as I've used ChatGPT to try to really uncover somebody's upbringing inside the Mormon church around attachment styles, like I love being able to bring in these different modalities and have AI like put the pieces together. And it talks about how, like, I brought in the idea of needing a savior, and there's no heavenly mother, and like she's too sacred, right? She's invisible. And like, what does that do to a little psyche growing up? Like, well, where is she? Like, can I talk to her? No, you can't talk to her. And so it's so common for, well, I wish there was studies inside the microcosm of the Mormon culture when it comes to this attachment theory. And because for me, what I've experienced is this disorganized attachment. And then it shows up in how I raise my kids. It's any of our relationships. So how I interact with my parents, my past partners, my current partner, it's like all of this is playing out at a nervous system level. And the prophet doesn't talk about that. Nowhere in the Book of Mormon does it talk about attachment, wounding, and theory, and how to reconnect and rupture and repair. So much talk is about just repentance and obedience, and then which creates this, it impacts attachment, because now it's conditional love, like I love you as long as you're obeying. And then you bring in the idea of Satan, where he can now impact our thoughts, and we can't trust our own bodies. Like if something is going against the teachings of the church, that's now Satan, and now Satan's in my thoughts and my body, and I can't trust myself, and I have to stay in line. And then when you leave the system that's taught all this, and your nervous system has learned with muscle memory, it's now an unconscious response. It's not, I'm choosing to push people away. It's happening underneath the hood because of decades and decades and generations of nervous system training and programming. And so this comes back to the mother wound, because what you're now doing, Wendy, is you're unplugging all of these programs, but you're left with this, like, who am I? And why am I doing this? And if we have guilt and shame playing as part of our programming to motivate us to do better, now, like, that's got to be one of the first that you got to pull out. This self-judgment, this self-critical, like, I need, what's wrong with me? I got to do better. Like, there's something wrong with me. Like, that programming lives still so deeply inside of me. And so removing all that and just allowing me to be this messy human that's moldable, and the neuroplasticity of our brains and the pruning that happens with the brain when it no longer uses particular thoughts or behaviors, the brain knows to just let those go. But we have to bring them all to the surface little by little and look at the patterns and be like, well, I keep doing this, and don't have judgment. It's just like, I keep doing this. What is this? Do I want to keep this? And I was like, and then I started to uncover like all of these patterns from the programming of the church. And so much of it, I don't know that they're doing it on purpose, but it's so like toxic to a human upbringing that And so that's the work, is starting to look at the patterns, and they show up in relationships so beautifully, like that conflict with our kids, with our mom. Like, those are the patterns. It's not who they are. It's not who I am. It's just a pattern.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so inside this attachment program that I'm watching, they keep bringing in compassion. It's like, no, it was an adaptive response to an upbringing, and that you learn to do it. And now you have to rewire it, and rewire takes work. It's not just awareness and then you're done. It's like, it's like, because it's like centuries old, and the part of the brain that handles this is like ancient. It's like millions of years old. And so you're dealing with this hard wiring, neurological, physiological, biological wiring of our body and our brain. And so can you have so much compassion that it's truly just a programmable thing? It's not me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing this. And so when you said you embedded your children with this, and there was like so much grief, I was like, you didn't do that. That isn't what you weren't like, I'm going to embed my
intentionally. It was never my intention to wake up and say, I'm just going to destroy my kid's life today. How could I make them more miserable as adults? What can I do? So cause them to have some sick attachment style where it would impact every relationship that they have. I had no capacity to even do that or understand, but I do know every morning I said, I'm going to be a better mom today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do my best. Who needs me? What do I need to do to be a better mom? And so, yeah, I can't beat myself up. I step back and see, like you said, there's a program there. There's a pattern there. It's not who I am. It was how I was operating from the programming. And I think a lot of what we like to talk about is, let's get back to the truth of who you are, so that you can witness the programming without being so hyper attached to it that you feel and so identified with it that you feel it's who you are. And until we can make that break and look at it as a canvas, almost like we are, it's the avatar that's operating and not really who we are at the highest level, then we're able to look at the pattern and go, oh, well, I need this. Let's make an adjustment here. This belief is certainly not serving us. And oh my goodness, this whole religion is like a clusterfuck of beliefs that really entangled, deeply embedded. And let's take that out. And then we're just kind of in all this space of observation until we can even get there. Mm-hmm. We can't do the work.
Yeah, so that's what you keep talking about, is when you leave, it's not enough to leave. Like you got to look at all of these things, and they show up so painfully and beautifully in relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it really has to do with the relationship that you have with yourself. Mm-hmm. And so much of the doctrine generates contempt against the self. And you're just never going to be good enough. You're so pathetic. You need a savior to die a bloody death on a cross for you. And you've got to live by these rules that are absolutely impossible for you to live on. And you have to bypass every human instinct that you possibly have, because your humanity is just an affront to God all by itself. And it just sets you up for tremendous failure. And it's the first step is, let's take this doctrine out. Let's deconstruct what you've been told about who you are. In a world where you've taught that if you let go of that, you will lose everything you love. That is the biggest lie. You can never even connect intimately until you let go of that program. And that's where we have people who appear to be living this Christ-like life because they know how to perform it.
Mm.
They know what the soft voice sounds like. They know what the appropriate clothing sounds like. They know what they need to do on Sunday, and opening their scriptures is good. So they're in this performative mode, but it's all like an overlay into who we really are deeper inside. And the first step is just, okay, let's take off the programming, the first layer called the church. But it could be not just, I don't know how it intricately impacts in other religions, but I do feel like religion, its intention might be to connect us to God. But really, the religions that I'm aware of actually sever us from our most holy and sacred self and deny us full access to who we really are as divine, sacred beings in this holy temple of a body, observing life on the most brilliant planet that offers us the polarity in order to see the difference and how to work those things out is such a gorgeous opportunity in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, there's a woman that I'm learning from, another one, who talks about all the parts that make up who we are. And a lot of these are performers, they're protective, that they're adaptive. We learn them in childhood on what gets us praise or gets us not hit. It's all these just going through life. The brain's collecting the data, the information. Oh, when I do this, dad's okay. When I do this, mom's not okay. So let me modify and do that, and I'll morph and become. And if we were raised in nobody had this. But if we were raised in a home where we were protected and we were nurtured and we were just allowed for this human being to be raised in the idyllic, scenario, the way we came out of the womb would be the way that we just grow. But we've got society, we've got culture, we've got systems, we've got trauma, that are forming us. And so we have all these parts that are just neural pathways that we've learned to perform or be. And then who is the real us underneath all of that gets to be the journey of looking at the patterns like, okay, I learned to do this, but if I stop doing this, do I still exist? It's like, okay, yeah, it is. So then that's just a pattern. It's not me. And so you decide, do I want to keep this or do I want to let it go? And then you just keep exploring that way. And what this lady talks about is that we have this main personality and then we have all these parts, and it's all like neural pathways, that exist inside the brain. And then who am I really gets to be the journey. And then what did I actually need in childhood versus what did I get? Not with blaming, but just like, can I give that to myself now? Can I experience that in my body, in my physiology? What does it feel like to be so unconditionally loved? And then when I feel that deep viscerally, like, how do I then step into the world? Like, how does that then ripple out? And that gets to be the work. But she just calls it a main personality, and that most of us have been living from protective parts, just in survival, just trying to fit in, trying to belong, trying to be okay, trying to get nice things from life. But if we weren't like modeled the most healthy version of what parenting could have looked like, we all just have these survival parts going on. And we call them, that's just who I am.
Yeah.
That's my personality. That's me. And there was a woman in my breathwork event, this was last year sometime, and she talked about how controlling she is and as a part of who she is. And I just asked the question, do you feel like you were you came out of the womb, you were delivered, and as a one day old, were you controlling? Like, were you trying to control? Like, there was no knowing of, I need to control my life, until life happened to her and the experiences taught her that. And so that's why it's so important to be introspective and reflective, and to look at how society has conditioned us to be human. And so there was a time last year where I actually unfollowed everyone on Instagram, because I was feeling into my body, and I was like, do I believe they're doing deconditioning work, or are they perpetuating more of what society has taught us is normal? And then Gabor Mate has a book that talks about trying to fit in a sick society.
It's like the
myth of normal.
The myth of normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I like unfollowed. I was like, if they're not doing introspective, like deconditioning work, and I'm watching their Instagram reel, they're programming me now to stay in it felt like a cesspool, like sewer. And I was like, they're not meaning to, they're just parroting what everyone else is. But do I want that to be my reality? Because it is all just based on perception, right? That's how we see the world.
Well, yeah, it's taking full ownership for what it's your diet. I mean, I'm sorry to read, not sorry. I'm observing how I'm relating everything to what you're putting into your body and what's inside your body, because I'm going through my own cleanse this week. But it really is, do I want this concept, this ideology, to be influencing my perception? And it's being it's just not discerning. It's discerning and taking full ownership and full exercising your full sovereignty to say, how do I want to program this being? And the first step is just even witnessing that you're being programmed.
Mm-hmm.
The second step is to say, and what is this program trying to feed me or sell me? And the next one is looking inside. Is that what I want? Is that what resonates with me? And most of us don't get to the point of reflection that deep. We're just scrolling because I'm bored, or we're scrolling because I'm numbing out, or I'm doing things that I'm not even conscious of how it's impacting me, just because it feels good at the time, and I don't have to address my internal emotions and what's uncomfortable for me. And that to me is the waking up part, is taking full accountability for your diet, what you're putting into your body, what you're putting into your mind, what are you programming yourself with? I mean, you get programmed by your world, by your parents, by your culture, by the media, by your environment, by your traumas. You are programmed. And the waking up part is to saying, I'm going to decide how I want to program this person called me. And that's stepping into our true authority and our true authenticity. And that, to me, is the most precious commodity that we can own in the future. And it's coming to this cataclysmic, almost like a collision, where we have fake media feeding one paradigm, and we have another fake media feeding an entirely different paradigm, and we have gender wars, and we have food wars, and are vaccines right? Are this? All of these questions are just up in the air for renegotiation. And if we choose to be conscious about it and we go inside, we can shut it off and just say, no, what do I believe? What do I represent? What do I want to program myself with? And it's not easy because you've got chemicals going on. You've got your whole internal world of bugs and parasites and mold and all the influence environmental things that are inside you that actually feed off of the loosh, the energetic loosh that you've been harvesting inside unconsciously. And it's, I mean, unless you're just going to go out into the wilderness without any Wi-Fi for a couple of months and see just literally how it's impacting you, we don't really know to the extent that it is.
Yeah, that's really big. That's the when it's in the water and it's in the air, like we don't have contrast. It's all we know. Mm. So going into the wilderness would give us the chance to experience like not this society, not the programming. And then physically you could, or emotionally maybe, you know, in that scenario, if you go into the wilderness and you're away from the EMFs and the culture, you might be able, I guess that's what monks would do for 30 years. They just go and meditate, and they were able to find it. And so let's talk about like what to do. So we brought all this up. We like to do this where we bring the awareness forward, and then what now?
Well, I'm becoming a huge advocate for doing an intentional cleanse. I mean, does the mechanics of brushing my body and getting the dead cells off my skin, of doing, I'll stay completely graphic because the fact that we don't talk about this without shame, but doing enema cleanses by being really thoughtful about, this week has only been fruits and vegetables this week. Understanding what's deficient in our diet, going for walks, journaling my thoughts, and just being super observant about what's going on internally. But not just that, it's literally been purging. And what happens with this is you become more magnetic. You are literally become the house of yourself for yourself. It becomes your temple the way you're designing it, and you get to be more magnetic and intentional about what you're drawing into you. And so to me, I'm going to say number one, you might want to consider a parasite cleanse. I know that's a weird thing, but I'm totally a believer at this point. Mm. But what's a thing that a tool that you would use, suggest?
Yeah, I've been really exploring core values, because if I grew up in an environment where I was told what to think, what to believe, that system has given me its values, and they're all beautiful. Like the church taught me to serve. Well, I have mixed feelings coming up when they're all beautiful, but you know, the church gave us, you know, family is important. Love. They talk about love and forgiveness, and those are all like beautiful values. And so, but those are the organization's values. And in young women, was it called the values? And what did the young women recite?
Well, isn't it great that we can't remember? Progress. Yeah, what was that? We're now going to say the whatever.
I think they're values.
We are daughters of our Heavenly Father who loves us. Here it goes. It still flows. And we love him. We will stand as witnesses of God at all times, in all things, all places. Oh, yuck. No, it's still there. That's funny. That programming is still there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it listed I think there were 7 values when I was in, like faith, divine nature, individual worth, knowledge, choice, and accountability.
Yeah.
But they're all good things. It's just the way that they were fed to us.
Well, and it's really interesting because there's such a lack of accountability by the church, and it's instilled into the people. but it's not done at the highest levels. Like there's so much dishonesty. And so people that leave the church, it's because something they are valuing is driving them forward. And it's usually towards truth. If they value truth, or like for me, it was when something's harmful, I want to go away from that. Like I value care, or I value treating people nice. And so with the LGBT and the just the shunning of people leaving, like those things aren't nice. And so I start to uncover what's true to me. What are my values? And they may overlap the ones that the church gave me, but they're mine. Like I get to then own them my way. And so it feels really important, because even society conditions us to value certain things. And I was watching a YouTube video about, I don't know, my daughter was watching it. She was having me watching. It was like these 5 guys that they have lots, I don't know, millions of followers. And anyway, they do these little games, and they had military people. There were 5 people, and as guests that used to be former military. And the game was to like spend an hour getting to know the 5 different people, and then guessing which branch of military they were in. And they kept saying, "Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service." And I was like, that's an instilled value that America has given us, that it's like honorable to protect us and to give up your family and give up your life to go fight a war. And I was like, that was installed though.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, America did it too. It's not just the church, right? Which I knew. And companies will do it. They'll have mission statements. It's a human thing that we want to have unified values, and that makes us now we're an us. Like we value the same things. And so, but do you agree with that? Like, do you agree that we should have a military? Like I value peace more than I value loyalty. I don't know. You could explore those and then create your own hierarchy, because that's what I'm dealing with right now, is this desire with my parents. As I'm leaving and they're still in, I feel like there was so much harm done to me within the system that they still love. Mm-hmm. And so now they have this value of loyalty and belonging. And I'm outside and I'm like, well, I value my autonomy, and I value speaking my truth. And how do I do it when those feel like they're at odds with each other? My values, my top value is clashing with their top value. And how do we navigate that now? We weren't taught how to do that, how to resolve conflict, how to have these really hard conversations where their belief system, like with the pre-existence and the we're here, like Adam and Eve, like all of those things I no longer even believe it with. So how do we coexist? And it feels like values have everything to do with it. I need to uncover my values. And then if my parents do the work too, and maybe the top is love, and we're like, oh, well, let's just hang out in that place where love can hold all of it, that value is so unconditional. But if they have beliefs that love is based on obedience, now we're at odds again. But it all comes down to values. And so that exploration of what do I value? What's my hierarchy? What's a non-negotiable that I won't even give up? Or is this one a soft value that I'm like, well, I can fudge it a little, I can move it around, I can soften it, I can put it below these other ones. But if you've never done the exploration to discover what you value that are yours, and how rigid are they? How soft are they? Are they flexible? Can you move them around? And which ones are you like, I won't give that up? like for me going back to the church, there's too many values that I'd have to set aside that would I'd no longer be honoring or being true to myself. So there's a value there. So that's I think that's really, really important.
I love what you're saying. In fact, this is one of the things I work with my clients is first is to understand that your values were given to you. They were programmed into you. And in a church paradigm, it is obedience is the first law in heaven. And then it's faith and sacrifice. So whenever there's like a conflict that comes in, the first thing we do is, how do we obey? We open up the scriptures. If you go into your bishop and you're saying, I've got this conflict, he'll open up the books so that he can align with the values that have been instilled with obedience. And then no matter what, you've got to believe in the Lord, and you've got to believe in the church, and you've got to believe. And then it's now up to you to sacrifice. So whatever doesn't align with those things, you must sacrifice. What a terrible program. If you think about the ramifications of that, it gives the illusion of safety. But it's a pattern that you and I bought into over and over and over again. And it's interesting when somebody leaves the religion, it's usually because they consciously or unconsciously realize that the church is crossing one of their internal values, whether it's kindness, like you said. For me, it was freedom. It was sovereignty to truly lead my own life. And so when I saw the mind control manipulative strategies, that's where I'm like, nope, that's not okay with me. And that's when the cognitive dissonance starts to set in. But I love what you're saying in that, what are my values? My truth was not on the higher rung of the scale in a church. The truth didn't really, they claimed that it had the truth, but whether or not it was the truth was never really a high priority for us.
Yeah.
And then, the truth is important to me. Loyalty, I love what you say about that. Loyalty to what extent? To the extent that I accept that I'm going to be abused and mistreated, and that I don't need to be loyal to a church. I don't even need to be loyal to a God who doesn't align with my own values. And so I think that is a crucial piece and part as we're reconstructing our life after deconstruction, is to say, what are my values? And like you said, it might coincide with other values that we have. Like family is still high on my hierarchy of values. But I see family differently now. Like, it's not my whole goal to get my family to the celestial kingdom. To me, my family becomes the unit in which I get to work out the most detailed things that I've come here to learn, how to connect in a more authentic way with them. And they get to be the canvas in which I learn how to love, and how I learn how to accept, and how I learn how to give, but not to the extent of my own well-being and my own health and my own evolution. And so family high up there, just as it was in church, but in a whole different way. Honesty, so important to me. For some reason, when I was in church, I watched myself learn how to manipulate to appear good enough, which is total self-deception. And in performance, all of that is not honest. So I love what you're saying. So I would say your internal and external diet, and for you, it would be become really hyper aware of your value system.
Yeah. Maybe we do an episode on just this, because I was exploring the temple questions too. And it's the one we've talked about where it's the law of sacrifice, where everything, your time, even your life, you'll devote and give to the church. And that's them dictating and deciding for you a value, and telling you that if you belong And if you love God, you will sacrifice everything. And I can feel my body just talking about it. It's like, so yeah, and this is where it gets so intertwined and you don't even know what's happening, that these values are placed into you by an organization, and it's manipulative because they tell you that they hold the keys. The only way back to God, back to your family, is through obeying staying to their values.
Yeah, so your most deepest insecurities and vulnerabilities are being exploited to offer some false sense of safety through what I call psychotechnology. That's what happened. It's an implant.
Mm-hmm.
It's a belief and an ideology implanted in you. Because our sense of belonging, our deep connection to the desire for connection to the divine, and wanting to keep our close family relationships close by, all those are our deepest human insecurities. And to say that if you want all that, you have to follow our program. It is the only way. And if you don't, you will lose it. And that right there is psychotechnology. That's an implant embedded into your psyche to get you to perform and behave a certain way.
Mm-hmm. So if we bring it full circle back to the wound, the guilt of the mother, if, let's say, go back like 6 generations and our grandma did this work where they uncovered it and they discovered their values on their own, outside of a system, outside the culture, outside of churches. And there was just like, they tuned in to the truth of who they are, like how they came into this world. There's like an essence, there's an energetic frequency, there's a signature that we all hold. And this is why I love breathwork, because inside breathwork, the mind can soften and go to the side, and you can experience the truth of who you are. It's just an essence. It's a feeling. But if your body holds so much shame, you identify with the shame because you feel it. But if you can get into some kind of a trance, whether it's meditation, plant medicines do it. Breathwork's one way that I like. And it's a way to just get to where you're not the conditioned mind. You're not your conditioning. You're not your emotions. That's truth. That's the truth about who you are. And if our great grandma had experienced that and lived her life with that knowing, that remembering, and she would attract a partner, she wouldn't tolerate anything less, like somebody that's still conditioned. She wouldn't put up with it. Like, she couldn't coexist in that space. And so then 2 people come together and they're creating this family system from this place of autonomy and freedom and exploration and messiness, like this divine mess that is humanity, and raising children from that place. And then the generational ripple that takes place from an unconditioned mind, or a consciously conditioned, like you get to decide, you choose it, and then you play it out. You're like, well, is this going to work? And then you try it out and you're like, shit, we messed it up. Let's try it again. Let's do it a different way. So that's the work. Bringing it full circle is doing this internal work, shedding what the lies that have been implanted. And then often when you discover, there's grief. Like, that's why grief work is so massive. It's so heart opening, and to be witnessed. And your anger, like the 7 stages, I don't remember them all, but there's anger in there. There's blame. There's denial. Like leaving the church, you're like, did that really just happen? There's no way. and then the blame. And then it's not just one time through the stages. It's, I discover a new thing, and then I go through the grief process on the new thing, and then there's another new thing, and you get to a place where you're, hopefully, where you're like, okay, I think I've owned my choices of living through that and my way out, and now how do I want to live from this place of choice and freedom and exploration? Like, what values do I want to own and embody and to ripple out into the world?
I have a piece that I want to share, and I want to share it. I don't know. It crosses. I feel like it might cross the line of keeping anonymity for my family. So maybe I shouldn't, but I'll kind of explain it in a vague way. And my granddaughter right now is looking to see if her mom is going to accept her for who she is, and looking to know if she's a safe person for her to express herself. And if my daughter did not receive that, she doesn't know how to give it to her own daughter. And so for me, if we come to that place, I don't have that. I can share it from here with keeping it anonymous. But because her mother, me, my daughter's mother, me, needed a mom to hear me, to accept me for who I am, to help me have the confidence to know that I could get through the hard things. I needed a mom who would listen without judgment and not spill all her emotions onto me and expect me to hold the emotional weight of her world. Because her mother, my mom, was lost in expectations of her world. She was worried about having enough money for her children. She was raw and hurting because of the relationship when she was building with my dad. She didn't know what to do with all the pressure and expectations placed on her with the load of a big family and a demanding God and no one there to hear her aching heart. Because her mother, my grandma, was bleeding and lonely inside from the loss of her dreams and the infidelity of her partner. Her sick body required her daughters to grow up far too fast. And then she died too early. She wasn't there to support my mom in the ways that she needed as a mother, to listen and to be present, because my mother's mother's mother, my great grandmother, was beaten and broken by a man who beat her until her sons were old enough to send her away and protect her from the one that should have kept her safe. Generation upon generation, unconsciously, we do create a generation that's a little bit better than the one before. But consciously, when we wake up to it, we can stop the patterns. If we're willing to be brave enough to go internally, to observe them, to not be hyper-identified to them, and to be able to shift generations of pain and struggle so that we can offer that strength to our children and our grandchildren. And that inner work, I don't think there's anything more important, at least to me, on my hierarchy of values. It's way up there. It's way up there. I hope that I can be the one that my children need instead of the one that the church taught me to be.
Felt like you were going to say, in the name of Jesus Christ.
I just was going to say the same thing.
So I wanted to say amen to what you just shared.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this conversation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'd love to hear any takeaways in the comments, any ways that this was beneficial, and anything that we can talk about. Thank you for being here with Unbinding. If this episode moved something in you, take a moment to honor that. These conversations are an invitation to remember yourself more fully and more freely. If you want to connect more deeply, come join us on our Facebook page called Unbinding. It's a space for reflection, for healing, and for community. And if this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone you care about. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. with your thoughts. We'd love to hear what's alive for you. Until next time, keep listening inward, keep reclaiming, and keep unbinding.